Um, no real updates today. Just further, I want to further elucidate what the long-term plans are that the elite have for those of us peasants. Because AI is coming for your job. That's true for most people, I think, because most practical labor has been eliminated in the West. That unless your job is tied directly to manufacturing or the maintenance of infrastructure, then you are probably replaceable on some level. At the very least, the ranks will be thinned. So even doctors and lawyers, for instance, once AI is able to diagnose ailments and then prescribe medication, you'll need one doctor with a license, but he might be in charge of like 100 AI agents, 100 AI physicians that people are accessing through kiosks all over the world. And so that one licensure through that one overseer is enough to, you say, rubber stamp all the conclusions that the AI is coming to. Same with lawyers, and so you won't need to consult a lawyer for everything. You could draw up a perfectly fine contract using AI. You can do that right now. But one day, AI might be able to represent you in court. It will be able to cite law. And so, these prestige professions, doctors and lawyers and teachers, much of that will be automated. Whole schools, even this year or next, are going to be planned according to the AI model. And teachers will not be necessary because you'll have an AI kiosk inside the classroom that will both assign. It will give the lecture, it'll assign the work, and then it'll grade the work. And you might have department heads with actual licensure that oversee the machines, but that's basically for legal purposes. There will be no actual need for human beings, apart from an advisory role. So AI is coming for your job, and AI is to be preferred by the elites because it doesn't have to be paid necessarily. Matter of fact, that if we understand AI as being birthed out of these data centers that are cropping up all over the country, and that it's us peons, it's us peasants, we're subsidizing the electricity. We're giving the tax write-offs so that these facilities can be built. We're paying for our own replacement in a way, so it doesn't cost the elite anything. But the problem remains for the elite. What do you do with all this excess humanity? And why do we even have excess humanity? We have excess humanity because we got rid of all the childhood diseases that would normally cull half the population. So if you go all the way back to 1800, about half of all the infants born would die. If not immediately, then within the first several years of life. The early childhood diseases would wipe out all the weaklings. And a lot of antisocial behavior correlates strongly with physical weakness. So if you're not physically strong enough to survive, and yet by some miracle you do make it, or by some medical intervention you do make it, you will grow up to behave in antisocial ways. And I know everybody can point to a counterexample. They had a cousin, an uncle, an aunt, a father, a mother, a brother, a sister, who were miraculously saved in infancy or in young childhood, and yet they grew up to be very normal, well-adjusted, pro-social people. And I will admit that there are exceptions. Many of the strongest simply die because they got a terrible disease by chance, or some accident takes them out, or in a state of nature they're simply attacked and they die in the melee by pure chance. And so I'm not saying that every person who would have died in a state of nature would necessarily have been a a poor addition to the overall human catalog. What I'm saying is that generally those who are weak are also antisocial. So if you look at like the morphology, we'll call it the morphology of your typical liberal, they're a mess. They have some serious problems typically with their appearance, with their weight, with their strength, with their immunity to disease, with their mental well-being. Many of them are mentally ill, far more so than conservatives. Although if you go too far to the right end of the spectrum, you encounter other deformities, which tend to mirror some of the antisocial or anti-life, anti-thriving that you see on the left. But the point I'm trying to make is that culling mechanism no longer exists. And so, every child, except the very most extreme cases, every child that's birthed into the world will probably see adulthood. But not every person is productive. And modernity demands all these social programs and all these social safety nets to keep people from starving to death. But what happens when such a large block of humanity is not productive? Not always for their own, not always by their own fault. Sometimes structurally, the economy simply eliminates certain positions, as it's about to do with AI. But this has been ongoing throughout the entire Industrial Revolution. So what do you do with these people when you no longer need them, and they can't be retrained, and maybe they weren't all that useful to begin with? If you're not going to eliminate them outright, using some pandemic or using some war as an excuse, you have to whittle them down over time. I'm speaking as one of the elites. And the only way you can do that, if you're not going to force sterilize, as was attempted in the 20th century, then you have to at least make it so that these people choose to not procreate. Now, why would anyone choose to not procreate? Well, this kind of happens naturally in our mouse utopia experiment that we live in. But the elites, I've noticed, are trying to edge it along faster and harder, such that anyone so inclined towards a non-procreative existence will choose this of their own free will and accord. That way they can't be painted with the eugenics label. But the fact is that what Klaus Schwab said a couple of years ago, that you will own nothing and be happy, that is the model that they want you to adopt, that you pack light, so to speak, through life. You rent your housing. You don't own physical media. You don't have a spouse. You don't have children. It's just you and a couple of bullshit things that you got from Walmart packed into a coffin apartment. And after you get back from your shitty job, if you even have one, you spend the rest of the night watching virtual reality pornography or interacting with an AI girlfriend, and you do not procreate. That way, within a few decades, you'll die of some terrible disease that you got by eating bug paste, and they don't have to pay your universal basic income anymore. And so what this is going to cause is a bifurcation of society. There's going to be kind of like a caste structure. And if we exclude the elites and we get rid of the middle class, you're really just going to have two tiers. There's going to be the mindless rabble that live on the bottom of the heap, who they get universal basic income. If they have any employment at all, it's not full employment. There's no benefits necessarily. They survive on bug proteins that are cheap or free. They survive on subsidized housing, just enough for a cot, somewhere for them to sit down and attach themselves to a screen. Their interactions are mostly online, and they themselves become so disgusting through this process of, you could say, dehumanization, that they're not ever going to be attractive to an in real life human being anyway. So the idea that they would procreate, the chances that they would, is slim to none. And so if you fall below that threshold where you cannot find gainful employment such that you cannot own a house, you'll necessarily fall into this bottom tier where you'll have no kids. Very few people will produce children on that tier. And so over the process of several decades, that whole segment of society will just be swept away by the mortality rate. Now, above that tier will be those people who have proved themselves to be useful to the machine, because the elites, they don't want a lot of us around, but they can't have none of us around. Like, it can't go to zero. The reason it can't go to zero is because AI can't do everything. And it's not just that AI can't do everything. It's that things like the maintenance of legacy programs, legacy infrastructure has to be done by human beings. And also innovation has to be done by human beings. Because AI is very good at collating existing human data and synthesizing it, but it is not good, and it cannot come about or discover brand new knowledge. That still seems to be the domain of humanity. So what the elites are attempting to do, it seems to me, is to eliminate that unproductive portion of humanity that natural selection used to eliminate by its own means 200 years ago. So what we're looking at is like kind of a social Darwinism, kind of like an engineered Darwinism, such that those who partake within this program, they do so willingly. And those who escape this soft genocide are going to be the ones that are resourceful, that work hard, that can identify problems that need solutions, that identify the work that is going to need to be done, the necessary labor, and will pursue those things. And in this environment, I feel like gender studies degrees is kind of like the bait. I don't think we need to get rid of the gender studies degree. It helps to funnel off these people who were never going to be useful for anything into some degree program and a cycle of debt that will force them into that lower caste where they will just not have any children. So who knows how long this experiment goes on for? Maybe it just goes on for a century. After it goes on for a century and we've kind of like siphoned off all the bad genetics into that lower caste and just let time do its work, maybe there will be like some dawning of a new era, to use a worn out phrase, in which we can just eliminate that lower caste entirely and live amongst productive peers again, instead of this class warfare where many on the bottom are there by choice because they have no ambitions. You know, that whole segment of society, if the you could say if the engineering is strong enough, their genetics would be eliminated. So it does appear that they do this from time to time, and I can't prove that every great culling was manufactured, but I will say that as far back, I guess, as the Vietnam War, they were releasing documents like what Bill Cooper used to publish, Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, and he in that document, which he tucks that document, Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, into the front of his book, Behold a Pale Horse. It talks about the need to greatly reduce the population at certain periods of time. Usually when debt cycles become so extreme that money ends up in gridlock. And it talked about money and the flow of money being akin to the flow of electricity. And you can have, in electrical theory, something called induction, where the draw for money is such that it overcomes all resistance. And if you think about a spark plug, the spark jumping the gap, you can have a buildup of monetary pressure, so to speak, where the money is locked up in debt, and the debt is attached to human beings. And the human beings can't pay any money for goods or services because all their money is going to service debt. And the only way to alleviate the debt on the books is to eliminate the human being, the debtor. And that would, once that person dies, all their assets are flung to the four winds, so to speak. They're liquidated, and that money becomes available again. We've reached a point in our debt cycle where a lot of the debtors just need to like go poof, like they just need to like stop breathing, and they have many ways of accomplishing this. I think that in part, the big coof and the vaccination schedule that followed did much to eliminate the boomer population, and all of the wealth that they were sitting on then got dispersed. It did a lot to do what would have taken time, another 2 or 3 decades to do. That whole project accomplished probably on the scale of millions ahead of schedule. And there are other things they can do. I think this war with Iran is going to cause tremendous hardship. I don't see how it could not, because both Iran and America are in this for the long haul. So poverty causes death. Warfare causes death. Attacks on U.S. soil, if they're large enough, if they affect enough infrastructure, could cause mass death. And so, because the elites have already explained why they do what they do, how they would do it, and what they want the end goal to be, this two-tiered structure in which much of humanity is simply eliminated by attrition, everything I see is kind of converging on that reality, that becoming the reality. And whether it becomes reality under Trump or in the next, whoever's president next, or Trump's third term, whatever, doesn't matter. If it takes them 10 years or 20 years, or it's accomplished within the next 2 or 3 years, doesn't matter. I think that's where it's going. So what should be your game plan? Your game plan, because you can't change the game, would be to not land in the bottom tier, that lower caste, the untouchables who survive on bug paste in their coffin apartment, whacking off to VR porn. You don't want to be there, because those people have no children, and the only way you perpetuate your existence in this world, the only way you show up for the future, is to have children. And so, unless you're just happy with oblivion, find, and especially if you're young enough that these decisions still matter, find useful work to do. I would recommend the trades. It's the last thing that will ever be automated, things like plumbing. All right, things like electrical work, HVAC, carpentry. Do something useful, and especially if it's to repair and maintain legacy infrastructure. Certainly get into that, because I think these are the last things that will be gotten rid of. These are the last things that can be automated. And once we have robots that could do the job of an electrician or a plumber, we have whole new problems that I haven't even thought about before. So in the short term, do useful work, don't go into debt. You will not fall into that lower caste, and then you can actually have a family and a purposeful life. So I've lately have been at a loss for anything to say. Maybe I've said everything I need to say. Still haven't written a book. Been reading a lot of books. But lately I've just been trying to brace for impact. I don't think anything's going to change or keep the future from happening. And as far as I can tell, it's pretty well orchestrated, even though it looks like chaos. Like Trump's most recent AI-generated post, where he basically portrays himself as some sort of antichrist healer, and he's wearing the robes of Jesus, and that's not hard to discern. And he's stooping over and giving the Lazarus touch to some dude that looks like Epstein. You can't tell me that was an accident. I reject the notion that was an accident. And then in the pantheon of the angelic pantheon that is arched above his head, there's a 3-horned figure that looks very much like the beast of Revelation, or some variation thereof. So was this an accident? Is this just Trump and his fat-fingered self just fucking off online? I don't think so. I think this is orchestrated, and I think he's signaling, if not to his base, then certainly other people who are watching, that what we're seeing is Antichrist revealed. And I guess I saw a bit of this back when he had his ear moment, his ear event. I said that he was being inaugurated for something big, and he was going to be something like King of the Gentiles, subservient to that little state over in the Levant. But if he's not the beast himself, then he's one of the beast's underlings. Very much of what he portrays himself to be is Luciferian. I think he lives on the 66th floor of his tower. Everything about his aesthetic within that tower is nothing but gold. Everything's gold plated. It's gaudy. I mean, it's more gaudy than Graceland. I mean, that's hardcore gaudy. Like, surely Trump has better taste than this, but perhaps he's actually trying to say something. He is kind of the sun child, the sun king. He is Apollyon. He is Lucifer. He is the light bearer. Think about how absurd he looks. The guy is painted orange. He has bleached blonde hair. He is the light bearer. And when something looks that absurd, we shouldn't take it to be eccentricity. Not from a public figure of his stature. It is signaling, in my opinion. And I believe what he has signaled recently is that he is Luciferian. And he will bring about the Luciferian order. And that order, if they're to be believed, is very much like I just described. So leave a comment if you have your own thoughts, your own experiences of this, your own premonitions of this. Let me know. And if you have any suggestions about topics I should cover, put that in the comments as well.